Alright, welcome. In this video we'll showcase a mono blue tempo deck with 0 rares and 0 mythics. So it's a budget friendly deck that you can try out without spending any of those precious rare and mythic wildcards. This is a tempo deck, so our goal will be to slow our opponent down and deny them key resources until we can play our finishers and swing for lethal. Our goal is not to kill all our opponent's stuff, but rather to keep them at bay while we present some 5/5 creatures to attack with. You can see the curve of this deck is relatively weighted toward 1 and 2 mana spells, but I'm going to reorganize the cards by their function so we can talk about the different types of spells in the deck. Alright, I've organized the cards by their function. Outside of lands, we have draw spells, bounce spells, counter spells, and win conditions. So let's start with the win conditions. Both of these are 7 mana but cost 1 less for each instant and sorcery in our graveyard. Tolarian Terror can get discounted to just 1 blue, and it has Ward 2, which gives opponent removal a higher tempo cost. Eddymurk Crab can get discounted to 2 blue. It has Flash and taps up to 2 creatures when it enters, so very useful against aggro decks to stay alive while putting threats on the board. This can also tap opposing blockers to sneak lethal through our opponent's defenses. Next up is the draw spells. We only have 8 win conditions, the 4 Crab and the 4 Terror, and we want to find multiple of them by mid-game, so digging through our deck is essential. Opt is a 1 mana instant that lets us scry 1 and draw a card. Being a 1 mana instant means we can usually squeeze it in somewhere, and it's a cheap way to fill our graveyard for our finishers. Moment of Truth is a 2 mana instant that lets us look at the top 3 cards of our library, put 1 in our hand, 1 in the graveyard, and 1 on the bottom. Putting an extra card in the graveyard means that a single Moment of Truth can put 2 instants and sorceries in the graveyard, which lets us turbo out our finishers much faster while also digging through our deck. Stock Up lets us look at the top 5 cards of our library, put 2 in our hand, and the rest on the bottom. This is a must simply because of the card advantage and the ability to dig especially deep into our deck. It lets us find exactly what we need, or in the worst case, dodge a 5-turn flood that would have lost us the game. And finally, Flow of Knowledge is a 5 mana instant that draws a card for each island we control and then discards 2. This is extremely good in slower matchups like Control and Midrange, but it's not good to draw early, so we're only playing 1 copy. Next up is the bounce spells to keep ourselves alive while we fill the graveyard for our finishers. We're using a lot of 1 mana bounce spells because it means turn 1 interaction and can also let us dig plus bounce in the same turn cycle. Bounce Off is a 1 mana instant to return target creature or vehicle to its owner's hand. Of course, this can bounce opposing creatures, but it also lets us bounce our own, which means if our opponent uses a Get Lost or Go for the Throat on our Tolarian Terror, we can dodge that removal on the cheap. Into the Floodmaw lets us bounce an opposing creature, or by gifting a tapped fish, we can bounce any non-land permanent. This means we can deal with planeswalkers or value cards like Unholy Annex that we weren't able to counter. Next up, Afara's Dispersal is an excellent card against aggro, letting us bounce an attacking creature for 1 mana and surveil 2, potentially putting more instants and sorceries in the graveyard. Finally, Aetherize lets us return all attacking creatures to their owner's hand at the cost of 4 mana. It is a 1-up that we can find with all our dig spells that is very good against go-wide creature decks. Next up we have the counter spells. Long River's Pull lets us counter target creature spell, or by gifting a card we can counter any spell. This is a very powerful option for mono blue decks because it has the versatility of countering anything, which is very valuable on a 2 mana counter spell, and that's why I'm playing 4. Outside of Long River's Pull, we're playing 2 Negate, 2 Phantom Interference, and 2 Spell Pierce. And finally, for the lands, we have 20 islands and 1 Demolition Field. The Demolition Field is just here to deal with lands like Mistrise Village and Cavern of Souls to make sure that we can counter our opponent's finishers. So that's the deck. The general play pattern is that we'll be on the defense early in the game while we're going through our dig spells to fill our graveyard, and then at some point we'll begin playing out our threats and try to establish a board presence to go for game. So now let's get into some matches. Alright, opening hand. Doesn't have any dig in the control matchup, so we might get punished for keeping this, but I'm okay with it. If our opponent is playing an aggro strategy, we're in a great position with a double dispersal plus bounce off. And we see a mountain, so looks like we're in good shape. Yeah, Afara's Dispersal just absolutely excellent, and we find the stock up, so as long as we can Afara's Dispersal surveil into a land on top, we'll be able to use this stock up to keep ourselves nice and replenished. As we see turn 2 Challenger, maybe it was supposed to counter that, but I'd rather save that for something like a Screaming Nemesis. And let's go ahead and counter the Challenger here, or bounce the Challenger. As we see another stock up, probably don't want double stock up in an aggro matchup, so let's just keep the land. and let our opponent hit. That sounded strange. As we go island, turn 3, what's the worst that could happen? They could have Emberheart Challenger plus Monstrous Rage. That doesn't seem that threatening. I think I'm okay going for stock up just to make sure the lands keep flowing here. As we see an island, and do we want to take a Tolarian Terror? Tolarian Terror is going to cost 4 after the stock up goes to the graveyard. We could also take a Moment of Truth to keep filling it, but we also have 2 bounce spells which are going to help us fill the graveyard, so maybe it's island plus Terror. I think I'm okay with Terror just because Dispersal will let us keep surveilling. This seems like a game where we're going to be able to turn the corner relatively quickly, so I want to get our threats out as soon as possible, and looks like our opponent's stuck on 2 lands, so that is just perfect for us. I'm even tempted to play out this Tolarian Terror, but that seems a little bit greedy, so maybe I'll wait and just use Dispersal when they try to pump something. As we see a Monstrous Rage, not sure, I guess it's main phase so that they can potentially find, I guess, a land. They could have done that combat as well. But we see opponent goes to attackers. We could just Eddymurk Crab here. I don't hate that. The only problem with that is then we're not getting to surveil, so maybe we'll give them another chance to pump their creatures. Opponent chooses not to, so we'll go for the Dispersal now. No white mana, so they can't Shard Mage's Rescue. So we see Opt plus Aetherize. Aetherize is great in this matchup, but I think I'd rather just kill my opponent as quickly as possible. And we already have the bounce off as well, so I think I'm just going to do this. Is that greedy? Maybe it's a little greedy. I think I'm okay with it. And that's really showcasing the power of Afara's Dispersal, because off of just a single 1-mana instant, we bounced our opponent's creature and put 3 instants and sorceries in the graveyard. We got the Dispersal, the Aetherize, and the Opt, so everything is discounted a ton. As we see the Challenger, and I might just counter this. Seems like they're a bit stuck. Yeah, I think I'm okay with this, because I don't want to play the Crab now, so I'd rather just use my mana. We go Island, Terror, Pass. And now the clock is ticking for our opponent. We see a Rockface Village. Yeah, our opponent is not going to be able to get much damage through here. Even if they swing with the Heartfire Hero and have multiple pump spells, we have to bounce off to make sure we're completely fine. And end step, we can flash in an Eddymurk Crab and start swinging, or even just save it for next turn. There's the Screaming Nemesis, so this, of course, is the argument for why I should have saved the Long Rivers pull, but I think I'm okay here. The opponent not keeping up a mountain, so that was a mistake. They should have tapped the Rockface Village for this, and then had the mountain up to at least pretend to have a pump spell. Opponent swings with Nemesis. I probably should have crabbed here before combat, but I'm feeling pretty secure at this point. I think I'm just going to crab end step, and I'll take this. You could also block here. Yeah, I think I block, because the thing is they can't do the 3 damage to the Terror because of the ward, so we're actually fine. And we're not gaining life anyway, so we don't care about that part. So down to 10, but I don't think we're in any danger. Play the Crab. So unfortunately, finding another island is not what we needed to see. Opponent down to 10. So this is an argument for why we maybe should have taken the Moment of Truth off the stock up. That's something that we saw earlier. We could have taken this and made sure we didn't end up in this situation of drawing a bunch of lands and not having much gas left in the tank. So let's see if we can manage to squeeze through that last 10 damage for lethal. Our opponent may be starting to realize that we might have more bounce spells after they've seen all these Afara's Dispersals. So thinking, perhaps, that it could be risky to swing with both these creatures. Of course, if they do swing with both, we win instantly because we have the bounce off to stop whatever else they put out, and the negate to prevent ourselves from getting hit for lethal. So opponent goes combat. Let's see what they decide. They swing with both. They reconsider. As we see the Hired Claw swinging and the Heartfire Hero staying back, but just a Heartfire Hero is not going to be enough to keep them alive, so they're going to need another creature here. Let's see if they have it. And looks like they do. We see a Heartfire Hero. So our opponent not dead yet. As we see an opt, if we find a second bounce spell here, that's just going to be game. So let's go digging. And Eddymurk Crab does it. So this is one of the nice things about Eddymurk Crab. Our opponent has 2 blockers. We need to get some attacks in. Oh look, both of their blockers are tapped now. So tap, tap. We have the negate if they have any shenanigans, and that's game. You see potentially a Witchstalker Frenzy. Lightning Strike dealing 3, that's not going to do it. Maybe a second Lightning Strike. And yep, negate that, and that's game. So, almost running out of cards against this mono red deck, but this is one of the fun things about this deck is you often end up in these situations where the game is relatively close, but with the resources you have, you're able to keep it under control and then sneak in lethal before you run out of resources. So that's really the ethos of the tempo playstyle, which I find very fun to play. All right, taking a look at the hand, we have 3 counterspells and a finisher. So going first, this doesn't seem terrible. We really do need to find some dig. So keeping is kind of a moment of faith, but maybe we'll try it. Of course, if we don't manage to find something like an opt, a moment of truth, or a stock up, we might be in big trouble here. The counter spells can hopefully keep our opponent at bay in the meantime, but it does mean we won't be able to fill our graveyard early on, which can be a bit of a liability. And that's the reason you'd rather have your opening hands with cards. Oh, it's Omniscience. So the nice thing about Omniscience is all you have to do is counter Abuelo's Awakening. As long as you can do that, you're in good shape. So I think I'd rather save whatever counterspells I can to just hit the Abuelo's Awakening. And we're going to stock up as early as possible to make sure that we have those counterspells on deck for when our opponent hits 4 mana. Do we need to get an island here? I think I'd rather keep digging through the deck and get these Tolarian Terrors going, honestly. So I'm going to take these and then hope that there's a land in the top 3. Of course, if there's not a land in the top 3, we do still have Negate and Spell Pierce, so we're in good shape. Omniscience is actually one of the best matchups for this mono blue tempo deck. You will win most of your matches against Omniscience simply because this deck is extremely bad against counterspells. Of course, if they find something like Mistrise Village, then you can be in trouble, but that's not often main decked in at least my matches. I haven't seen it very much out of Omniscience. So we can pass here. If they go for the Awakening, that's an easy Spell Pierce, and then we can still opt. We see opponent apparently, I guess they can't Awakening yet without the Omniscience in the graveyard, so as we find Moment of Truth, excellent. That's another way to fill our graveyard, so I'm going to take that in a heartbeat, and we can go ahead and cast it right away. As we see, Aetherize, not the matchup, but another counterspell I will take. As we find an Eddymurk Crab, so Tolarian Terror is actually okay to run out here because we still have the ability to hold up Spell Pierce and they'll have a maximum of 5 mana next turn, so I think I'm okay with playing this out. I want to get the clock ticking as quickly as possible to make sure they don't have the opportunity to get a bunch of lands and potentially do the combo of Abuelo's Awakening plus a Confounding Riddle to counter our own counterspell. But Our opponent seems to still have not found an Omniscience, which is great for us. So they are in a pretty compromised position here. They could potentially surveil an Omniscience here and then use Abuelo's Awakening, but we have the Spell Pierce for that. As we see another Archaeologist, no problem. Look at the top three, finds nothing. As we draw Flow of Knowledge, so our hand's looking a bit awkward here. Unfortunately, we can no longer rely on holding up Spell Pierce because next turn they'll have 6 mana, so they'll be able to pay the 2. If they, for example, go for a Moment of Truth, and with this 2 mana, they Moment of Truth, hit an Omniscience in the graveyard, play land number 6, play Abuelo's Awakening, Spell Pierce wouldn't do it because they'd be able to pay the 2. So we cannot play the Terror here, we're just going to have to swing and pass. This is probably a matchup where we actually want the Flow of Knowledge so that we can find more counterspells. Luckily enough for us, we can actually discard 4 hand size here and get rid of an Forest Dispersal, which doesn't do much in this matchup, but it means that our creatures are discounted by 1 extra. As they still haven't found an Omniscience, so great news for us. At this point, we could think about playing out the Eddymurk Crab because, well, that still wouldn't work because if they go land number 6, Moment of Truth, put Omniscience in the graveyard, Abuelo's Awakening, revive. Actually, that would be okay because we could Spell Pierce it. So I guess one option we have here is Eddymurk Crab, but I don't think we need the Safari's Dispersal for anything, so I might rather just discard it and make our creatures a little bit cheaper. And we're currently sitting on 4 counterspells, so that's the nice thing about playing this deck. Is if you're up against Omniscience or some other type of combo, you have counterspells for days. As our opponent goes Moment of Truth, they can resolve that. But yeah, now we have the ability to play Tolarian Terror and still keep up a 2 mana counterspell, so they can't pay because negate is not conditional. You could next turn have 7 mana up, which means potentially Abuelo's Awakening plus Confounding Riddle, so we should keep that possibility in mind and probably try to hold up 3 mana's worth of counterspells. So I guess that means we don't want to play the Terror here because then we're only holding up the negate. So if we go, they Abuelo's Awakening the Omniscience, we go negate, they go Confounding Riddle, we are in big trouble. So I think we'd rather just swing for 10 and pass here. As we see a Forest Dispersal, no problem. We can just replay that Crab anyway. Opponent keeps both on top, so pretty interesting. We see another Forest Dispersal. There's a question now of do we Spell Pierce this, because it is pretty important to start getting damage in. On the other hand, keeping the Spell Pierce means more counterspells for us, so the problem is that if we don't Spell Pierce this, well, if we do Spell Pierce this, then we could be in trouble with an Awakening plus a Confounding Riddle, so I think I'd rather just let them bounce this. We are going to have to discard 2 now. So let's say probably the Flow of Knowledge we don't need at this point, and maybe the Spell Pierce can go. Although Spell Pierce is a bit better than Phantom Interference because they don't play creature spells. So we're in now the position of being able to play Tolarian Terror for 1 mana. Seems like our opponent hasn't found an Awakening yet, or is maybe hoping to get a Confounding Riddle online before they go for the Awakening, realizing that we probably have a counterspell. But now we're just going to go ahead and play the Crab. Not sure what our opponent's thinking about here. They don't go for it. Play out the Crab. The nice thing about this deck against Omniscience is the abundance of counterspells means that you don't feel a lot of pressure to finish them quickly, so it's okay if they Afara's Dispersal bounce your Crab a couple times, because you can just keep replaying it, and you know you're secure with all these counters. So we might see another Dispersal, but again, that's no problem. We actually see a Morong River Regent, totally fine. Much rather save my counterspells for the Awakening. As we deal 5, and they are going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mana next turn. So that means enough to pay for Spell Pierce, but if we go Awakening, they go Awakening, we negate, they go Confounding Riddle, they're only going to have 1 mana left, which means they won't be able to pay the 2 for Spell Pierce. So we should be safe playing out this Terror here. Need to keep 3 mana up for the combination of Negate plus Spell Pierce to make sure that scenario does not catch us. As we see an Awakening, so let's negate that. And let's see if they have the Riddle. They don't have the Riddle, so that's 1 Awakening down. They could have a second one with 8 mana, but we do have the Spell Pierce in that situation as well. They do. The second Awakening, that's not resolving either. So I do feel a little naked now having only 1 counterspell, but then we see the Phantom Interference, so that's excellent for us. So now I'm probably going to hold up 4 mana so that I can do both of these. The problem, of course, is that if they have a third Awakening plus a Confounding Riddle, that's going to be enough to still pay for the Phantom Interference. So in that scenario, we would be in big trouble. Unfortunately, Stock Up is not going to help us with that. So we'll have to think about how we want to play this. I think we do hold up the 2 counterspells, and then we can flash in Eddymurk Crab at the end of turn, and that'll be plenty for lethal. So let's see if they have a third Awakening. They do not. So this is a 6 mana Morong River Regent, and I am completely fine countering that because if I counter this, they have 3 mana left, and that's not enough to do anything of significance. Worst case scenario, we still have Phantom Interference and then 10 damage to face. So this should be game. Their opponent has a Roiling Dragonstorm. Yeah, that's not going to save them. They're probably looking for an Afara's Dispersal here to potentially stay alive. Of course, they don't realize that we have another Crab, so their hope is wasted. And they scoop it up. So yeah, that was a game where we didn't find a lot of lands, so we had a bit of a problem with putting out our threats while still holding up counterspells because we were on 4 mana the whole time while our opponent made it up to, I think, 9 lands. But being able to hold up those counterspells meant that we were able to stave off the Awakenings. They had a double Awakening and we had the double counterspell ready, and we were able to close it out. All right, I'm liking this hand. We have a bounce spell, counterspells, and dig. We don't have the early dig spells that would let us fill our graveyard, but Stock Up will at least let us find what we need. Maybe not anymore now that our opponent has the Duress. So hand hate can definitely be a problem for this deck, specifically in the sense that if your hand only has 1 dig spell to potentially get to your finishers, your opponent can take that with something like a Duress and leave you just hoping to top deck. This, of course, is not a deck. Taking the Long River's Pull is an interesting choice. We did draw the Moment of Truth, so if they had taken Stock Up, we would have been okay. But it looks like our opponent is on some kind of creature plan taking the Long River's Pull. We'll see if they play something like a Slasher potentially this turn. I think if they play a Slasher, I can just let it happen in Flood Maw, but they do not, so I'll just go for a Moment of Truth. As we see Tolarian Terror, another Moment of Truth, and Island. Definitely don't need the Island. I think since we have Stock Up, I will just go for the Terror and put Moment of Truth in the yard to keep filling our graveyard with instants and sorceries. So our Tolarian Terror already down to 4 mana. Play the Stock Up. Opponent on mono black is not going to have a way to deal 20 damage in an empty board with just 4 mana. As we see, still don't need lands, so I think I probably take another creature counterspell and the Eddymurk Crab. We're out of dig at this point, but we do have 2 threats and plenty of ways to keep our opponent at bay. We'll see if they play something like an NX, but honestly, I'm not too concerned about an NX because we're going to be going for lethal pretty soon. Opponent plays a Liliana, so we're going to need to kill that. I think I probably am okay discarding 1 island here. As we see an Aetherize, not really the right time. If I play a Tolarian Terror now, Liliana's just going to kill it, so I think I'd rather flash Eddymurk Crab at end of turn and then use that to kill the Liliana. So let's hold for now. Worst case scenario, we have the Long River's Pull. Liliana makes us discard, we can get rid of the Aetherize.
You won't be outsmarting me.
As we see a Nowhere to Run. So opponent might have a Go for the Throat for the Eddymurk Crab. If we feel desperate, we could also Long River's Pull to counter something like that. But opponent on mono black almost certainly has some type of removal, so it wouldn't be surprising if they just immediately go for the throat here. And we see an Edict. So do we counter this is the question. Killing the Liliana is sort of a priority, but alternatively we could go Floodmaw to bounce it. Unfortunately, if we Floodmaw bounce it, they of course can just replay it, and at that point, our Eddymurk Crab is still going to die, so I think I want to try countering this. Of course, if they have a second removal spell, that's going to look pretty stupid. But it looks like they don't. So let's go ahead and swing. Get this Liliana out of the way. So we see a Nowhere to Run, so this is going to keep the Liliana alive. So what do we think about this? I could counter this to make sure the Liliana dies. If this Nowhere to Run resolves, this Liliana is going to go down to 3 loyalty. It'll still be able to kill the crab, which is a bit annoying, but it would mean that we get to save our counterspell for something else. So I think I'm okay with that because this Long River's Pull is going to let them draw a card, and that's not really where I want to be here. So go for the crab. One option we have here is we could either play the Terror now and let Liliana kill 1, or we could bounce our crab when the Liliana activates and then replay it. So I think I like that option. So this is really a situation where we see why bounce off is nice to have. It means that our opponent can go for a removal option and we can keep our card.
Haven't you ever heard of personal space?
So we see a Bloodletter, so could counter this, but I think I'm okay just going for Eddymurk Crab here. Aclazotz by itself is not that scary, it's only 4 damage per turn. So if they go for a Slasher, we have something like Floodmaw to get rid of it if needed. But right now I just want to make sure this Liliana sees the end of days. Another option we have is going face with the crab, but I don't think we're quite there yet. I guess the advantage of going face with the crab is our opponent doesn't really want to plus Liliana with only 1 card in hand. But they could also just empty their hand and go for it, so I think having a counterspell means that I'd rather just try to keep them on nothing.
Sorry, I'm not interested in dying.
So let's play the Tolarian Terror and pass turn. And if they decide to swing with Aclazotz, I think I'm completely fine letting that go through. Soulstone Sanctuary, a little annoying because that becomes a blocker, but no big deal. Opponent decides to swing. So they're going to have to block here, because if they let us get through this 10 damage, we can probably just keep them at bay with these bounce and counter spells and then just sneak in another 10 damage. So opponent realizes their situation, decides to chump block. And that's fine. So that does give them 1 extra turn. We could have potentially bounced the Soulstone Sanctuary there, so I think there's an argument that that might have been correct, but they could also have chosen to keep back the Aclazotz as a blocker, and I don't know if we would have had quite enough cards to keep them at bay at that point. But opponent, feeling very brave, deciding to swing with the Aclazotz despite the fact that they're about to go to 5. So opponent at 5. I think we can opt here. An island, not what we need. As we find an island anyway, so we'll play that and pass. But yeah, our opponent's at 5, so they need to have either 2 blockers or a way to kill one of our creatures. And I don't think they can manage that when we have the counterspell plus 2 bounce spells to get rid of their blockers. And yeah, there's no way they win that, and they know it. Even with just the public information, we had the Into the Floodmaw, so an Archfiend of the Dross essentially means they're tapping out. There's no way they kill this for 1 mana. So they have 2 blockers, but we have 1 public bounce spell. They didn't even need to know about the counterspell and the second bounce spell, but yeah, that game was totally a wrap at that point. Alright, opening hand, we don't have any bounce spells, so if we're playing against aggro, this hand's a little slow, but we are going first, so I think we might be okay. If they play a 1 mana creature here, we're not going to have anything to say about it, but we do potentially have a counterspell next turn if needed. As we see an opt, so looks like a slower start for our opponent, and that's good news for us. Another stock up, really not what we wanted to see when we already have another stock up and 2 moments of truth. So this hand definitely a lot slower than we'd like to see against a somewhat fast deck. What are they going to do with their 2 mana? If it's nothing threatening, we can Moment of Truth and try to find more things, fill our graveyard, get our threats out. Or we might feel the need to counter something. But if they plot a Slickshot Show-Off, that gives us a nice window to Moment of Truth. If they decide to Sleight of Hand, nothing to say about that. So it looks like we'll have a nice chance to Moment of Truth here, and it looks like our opponent is in a bit of a rough spot with their hand, as they finally find a Swift Spear. Do we counter this? In the absence of bounce spells, it's kind of tempting to counter here. Of course, if they had the Swift Spear last turn, they probably would have played it, so maybe they are just really on nothing. But we are also really on nothing if we don't find a land here, so I think I let them go for this. So I imagine they'll attack. Moment of Truth, and we find the land. Could keep the Tolarian Terror, but I think we want the land here. Spell Pierce also would have been nice against Kori Steelcutter, but we have the Long Rivers Pull, so worst case scenario we can use that. Question now is whether we stock up here. How much damage can they really do with 3 mana and nothing plotted? The worst they could do is Kori Steelcutter and then summit something else like maybe a Monstrous Rage. That would be a lot, but still nowhere near dying, so I think I'd rather just keep my game plan going. As we find not what we wanted to see, probably taking the Dispersal and an island. We're really looking for things like Eddymurk Crab here. Tolarian Terror. If this Tolarian Terror had been an Eddymurk Crab, I might have decided to take it, but Eddymurk Crab's ability to be used defensively makes it much stronger in these matchups than Tolarian Terror, which can feel a bit clunky in comparison. Opponent decides to stock up, so it turns out we wouldn't have needed this Long Rivers Pull here anyway. But we have double bounce spell now, so we're in a pretty good position in terms of preventing damage to us. I might island stock up again next turn, although I'll have to think about whether that would make me discard for turn, which it would. So that doesn't sound particularly appealing. I think I'm going to pass. I like the cards in my hand, so I'd rather not have to discard anything. Our opponent certainly having a tough time getting themselves on the board, so I think Long Rivers Pull countering a creature is probably worth it. Of course, every extra Prowess creature they have means another trigger whenever they cast a non-creature spell, so I'd rather keep them on as few as possible. Long Rivers Pull on Talent, not really that appealing because it does gift them a card, so I think I'll let them have that, especially because the Otter doesn't have haste, so I'm not feeling particularly threatened. If they have a Monstrous Rage, I'll bounce. If they don't, I'll just let them swing. Looks like they have something. As we see, they decide not to go for it, and I'll take the 2, Moment of Truth, end step. And we're really digging for threats at this point. I want to start putting things on the board. We did not find threats, so this is an interesting question. Do we take the 1 mana dig or the 2 mana dig? Next turn we're on 5 mana. We can stock up and hold up 2 mana. I think that's what we're going to do. In that case, we might want an opt because we could go a Forest Dispersal plus opt. That sounds okay to me. Opt always the more flexible option, so in an uncertain situation, if you already have dig power, it's okay to take an opt, whereas if you're more desperate to find something, then Moment of Truth, of course, is going to see 1 card deeper. So let's stock up here. Could see a Spell Pierce, we could pay the 2, that would put us in a bit of a compromised position, but I think I might pay it anyway, as we don't see it. So now I'm definitely taking the Terror because I want to start putting things on the board. And what else do we take? Probably a Bounce Off. That's just keeping our opponent on nothing, I think, is the right way to go. We could also Phantom Interference, because, yeah, if they find a Quarry Steel Cutter, Phantom Interference might be the right play here. But we can play out a Tolarian Terror. So we're not going to have the Phantom Interference up now, but we'll have the Bounce spell. And I want to start threatening things. So Tolarian Terror is a very, very powerful blocker when it's backed up by a bounce spell, because we can block something, and then if our opponent tries to pump, then we can just bounce in response, and now they're losing cards. So opponent goes attackers, decides to swing. Let's block the Swift Spear. Opponent goes Monstrous Rage. Let's see what this looks like. So up to 5. I'll let them decide if they want to do anything else first here. If they have a Spell Pierce, that would not feel good, but at least the Swift Spear would still be dead, as we see a second Monstrous Rage. So this is an interesting situation. Ah, they have another one. So something like an opt here. Into the Floodmaw just to trigger Prowess, sure. So now let's look at our options. 7/6. If we don't bounce here, it's just going to kill our Terror, and we're not in any danger of dying here. So I think we dispersal this, keep our Terror alive. It's tempting to dispersal the Otter just because the Otter goes away forever, but I think we're honestly okay here. Of course, the fact that this now has 6 toughness is an argument for why we maybe should have blocked the Otter instead, because this is a symmetric situation. The Otter would have died, we could have bounced the Swift Spear, that would have put us in a much better position health-wise, but let's see. We do not need more counter spells, absolutely not. As we go to 8, find an island. Do we swing with Terror? Let's see what's on top. Find a negate, not what we need. Eddymurk Crab, excellent. Now we can swing, knowing with confidence that our opponent will not be able to kill us through a Crab and 3 open mana. So we see a Swift Spear. I could counter this. Clearly they don't have a show off because we would have seen it by now. So I think I'm okay countering this just because I have so many counter spells and I want to use my mana on something. This is interestingly a situation where the 2 power from Phantom Interference could make a difference. So unfortunately we only had 5 mana up, so we could not have gone Phantom Interference plus Crab. I'm going to let them swing here because if they have a pump I can just bounce off. So that's actually okay for me. As we see another Monstrous Rage, no problem with that. Probably don't want to take this because that puts us quite low. But let's see. If they decide to burn themselves for 1 again, that's pretty much game because we have 10 going face. And they do. So opponent realizing that this looks like 8 damage, but of course they're not going to have the chance to see the light of day on that. The otter disappears, we take the 2, and Crab is game. Even if they had a Flood Maw there, we had the Phantom Interference and the Long Reverse Pull to make sure it didn't resolve, so that game was extra over. Alright, hand seems pretty good. 2 lands, some digs, some interaction. Overall relatively balanced. We will have to find what we need with these moments of truth, but that's how this deck goes usually. As we see Valgavoth's Lair. So probably some kind of enchantment synergy deck. Well, our plan is Moment of Truth most likely. Phantom Interference if it proves necessary, but we'd rather start digging if we can. Green-white, Llanowar Elves. As we find... Eddymurk Crab is a card that we need eventually, but we're going to need lands. Could also Moment of Truth for a land main phase, but then we're potentially not continuing to hit our land drops, and getting an island here means that we can use the Moment of Truth to find other things like dig spells that we might need more desperately. So now no need to get an island with Moment of Truth, especially since we top decked another island. We can use it to find maybe a stock up, maybe a counter spell, or maybe another crab. And hopefully put something in the graveyard to get this Tolarian Terror out as quickly as possible. As we see a Pawpatch Recruit with Offspring. I think I'm okay with this just because of the Aetherize. This seems like a matchup where Aetherize is going to be excellent. I'm okay with letting them walk into it. As we see another Llanowar Elves. So less Moment of Truth. Finding an Eddymurk Crab, I think I'm taking that. Put a bounce off in the graveyard. And we could Flood Maw, but I think I'm okay. So now, do we play Tolarian Terror? It's an option. I don't think we're going to die next turn. But I think it's okay to wait. If the situation doesn't look too dire, we might just Eddymurk Crab. And that also means that we can opt into Eddymurk Crab, which is convenient. We see Calyx guided by Fate. Phantom Interference not going to stop that. Let's see how scary this is. Yep, this doesn't draw cards, so I'm not concerned. Definitely some type of enchantment synergy deck. Opponent has an enchantment, so if this Llanowar Elves hits us, they're going to get a copy of it. I think we can just Eddymurk Crab here. When this aura is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, draw a card. Well, they're going to get that eventually. Let's go ahead and opt. Find an island. Do we need an island? We kind of do. I think I'm okay with that. At the same time, we might need more answers. Terror is not bad. And now we can play Crab. So let's tap this down. And the Pawpatch Recruit. And wow, A single Eddymurk Crab counts as 2 targetings. So they get 4 counters. Decide to put it all on the token, so that's 6 damage to face, but once that gets bounced with Aetherize, it'll be all gone. So now we have Bounce Off, stuck on 4 lands, so maybe should have kept the island. Looks like we're holding up Aetherize. I'm going to swing. And let's see what they decide to do. Paw-Patch Recruit with Offspring. Can't counter that. Unfortunately, Aetherize is not going to catch it, so we're just going to have to let that sit. Could potentially let them swing. 6, 9, 12, 13. No, it's already lethal, so we will need to Aetherize. Fortunately, that does mean our opponent is incentivized to swing with everything except maybe this elf. And yeah, they see it. So now we have no choice. Could also Bounce Off. I don't think that works out the way I want it to. So let's Aetherize. But yeah, definitely would have preferred to take that island in retrospect. Especially knowing that our opponent's on all these Paw-Patch Recruits. Getting interaction spells, really not where we want to be. As we find an island, so that's nice. I think I bounce off main phase just so that I can double terror here. And do we swing? I think we do. In retrospect, of course, knowing that we were going to swing, we should not have played the terrors first, because that's just extra information for our opponent. The unfortunate part of this situation is that it's quite easy for our opponent to hold back chump blockers with the number of creatures they have, so we really can't expect these to get through. Shelter by Ghosts, an interesting choice. We can't. The best we could do is Flood Maw the Paw-Patch Recruit in response. I'll let that resolve. Paw-Patch Recruit at 5 power. I can take that to the face and bounce this next turn. Not a great position though. Here's Talent. We can counter that. Decides not to swing. Let's think about this. They're forced to block something, because if we swing with both of these, that's lethal. We could go into the Flood Maw, bounce the Paw-Patch Recruit. In that case, they chump with Scavenger and are able to replay Recruit next turn. It's not the best situation, but I think it's probably what we're working with. Would also just bounce the Sheltered by Ghosts, but I don't think I want them to get that back. Yeah, buffing the Optimistic Scavenger is not correct here because they know they have to chump with it. Opponent realizes and puts it on the elves. So now we swing. Opponent chumps. They're at 5 life, so they're going to need to hold back chump blockers, but seems like they have plenty of those with 2 Offspring Paw Patch recruits. Finds an Enduring Innocence, so that's going to keep them topped up on cards. This has lifelink, which is not good for us. Decides not to Offspring the Paw Patch recruit, which is a bit bizarre. Maybe playing Calyx. If we could find something like a stock up off the top, that would be excellent. As they find Ethereal Armor, which is extremely good here. First strike 5 damage, pretty much renders our deck inert. So let's Demolition Field, get some islands off our deck. I guess should have hit the Razor Birch Thicket because that's the one that burns them. Opt gonna need to find something better. Long River's Pull far too late. Another one. So, unfortunately, even if we swing with everything, we're gonna be gaining them 5 life, so they're at 10 here. One of our creatures is just gonna die. They are forced to chump because if they only block with Innocence, they take 10. But if they chump, then they lose a Llanowar Elves and we lose a 5/5, so that doesn't seem like a particularly good trade. I think we have to hang back. Long River's Pull at least can keep them off Calyx if they choose to play that. And I think we just have to pray that the next card in their hand is not something live. Really, our win condition here is that we find something like a stock up off the top and figure out a way to get through. Really, any bounce spell would be okay here to get rid of the Innocence and force them to chump. If they swing with Innocence, I think I'm double blocking. They choose not to, so let's see what we can find. Ifara's Dispersal might be what we take here. I think so. That also lets us surveil, but this means that their Enduring Innocence no longer has 5 power and first strike. Paw Patch Recruit, a frustrating consequence, but still not going to get them up to 5 power. I suppose they could double block, but then at least we're trading favorably. An Eddymurk Crab is exactly what we need. Dispersal's not bad either, so I think I might keep both. And let's go ahead and swing. And now we're clearing their board. So if we stay alive, which it seems like will happen here, this Eddymurk Crab is actually going to be game. We see the Innocence, and yep, opponent realizing that this game is now over. So wow, a pretty close game. Definitely could have gone either way. We got quite lucky with the Ifara's Dispersal and then surveilling into the Eddymurk Crab to get rid of their Enduring Innocence. But thanks to that and the Long River's Pull keeping them off of Calyx, we were able to push through. All right, this hand... Against a person with Jace sleeves, this hand might be quite good. Against an aggro deck, this hand is awful. We don't have any dig. I think it needs to be a mulligan because this hand is just not going to get to our threats fast enough. This at least has stock up, so I think I keep this and put back the terror. I'd rather not put back lands because the more lands we have in our hand, the more we can stock up to find things other than lands. As we see in Archaeologist, so it looks like Omniscience. They find a Spell Pierce, so on a slightly different variant. We're going to need to watch out for this because it means we need multiple counter spells as soon as they hit 5 mana. As we find, gonna need a Spell Pierce. Might Question is, do we take a land or do we take an opt? I think opt is probably better, just to keep digging. It's an interesting choice. I think I take the opt. I don't want to get stuck here, and I don't have any more dig. So next turn, opponent potentially threatening Omniscience. Do they discard it? No, they discard an Awakening, which is interesting. So they probably have another one of these, but unlikely that they can get an Omniscience in the graveyard off of just a 1 mana instant. So it seems like we're safe for now, but not much we can do other than opt here. So I suppose we'll just save that for later. We could opt on our turn, but that means that they could potentially Spell Pierce it, force us to pay 2, and then untap. So I'd rather make them use that Spell Pierce on the same turn cycle as a potential Awakening. Let's go for opt. We see Etherize, terrible in this matchup. Put that on the bottom. Find a stock up, that's not bad. If we stock up here, we need to find an island. If we find an island, and they have a way to put Omniscience in the graveyard here, maybe a Morong River Regent plus an Awakening. They could have 5 mana, hold up a Spell Pierce, but if we have an island, we can double Spell Pierce that, and that would be okay. I think we go for it just to keep the gears turning. We haven't played land for a turn yet, so if we find a land in the top 5, we're okay. They could also Spell Pierce this. They choose not to. We find an island and a negate. So that's what we're taking. Land for turn, and we should be all right. We have to keep in mind, of course, that they have a Spell Pierce. So this is interesting. The fact that they discarded an Awakening, it seems to me like they're going to be discarding an Omniscience here. So Spell Pierce now could actually keep them off of that and might buy us some extra time. We have plenty of counter spells, so I think I might actually do that. You could Phantom Interference, but then you're tapped out, so next turn if they have Meticulous Archive Surveil Omniscience into Awakening, we would lose. So I'm going to do it like this. And there's the Meticulous Archive. No Omniscience yet. There's the Omniscience. So we really need to start getting our threats out now. Tolarian Terror, not really safe to play, unfortunately. We have 5 mana, so if they play an Awakening, they're going to have 2 mana left, which potentially means double Spell Pierce. So we might need to hold up everything here and then just Crab end step. I think that's the safest play. Could try to opt for a land. We could get punished if we do that though. So I think we hold. You could argue that it's better to play out some cards earlier just to make sure that we're putting more pressure on them, because the longer we wait, the more time they have to continue finding relevant cards. Stock up, I'll let resolve because I'm at the point where we have counter spells and we really need to start putting pressure on them, so I want to emphasize tempo over card advantage. They don't have the ability to go for Awakening here. So let's Crab first. Opponent scoops it up. Well, that's nice to see. Of course, our opponent didn't know much about our hands, but in our hand we had the Eddymurk Crab, which could start swinging. We have the Tolarian Tear, we have the Oct, which means that these cards are going to be relatively cheap, and we have 4 counter spells. So once they start getting that Awakening going, it's not going to resolve. So that's pretty nice. We made it to Diamond 2.